CU was a virtual event where we brought in IT leaders from the credit union space, along with a handful of proven partners. And this fourth and final session will be featuring Gradient Cyber. In their 20-minute educational spotlight, they will be focusing not on what they're best known for, which is MDR, but how they play alongside and with one of our favorite solutions, Cato Networks SASE platform. Let's see what they have to say.
Segue, yes. We are in the MXDR space at Radiant Cyber. We're a partner of Matrix Networks, and I did want to speak specifically about how we can integrate with Cato Networks for credit unions who are very cloud native already or are intending to move in that direction. It's a very, very good fit, but there's some things you need to know about what Cato does that isn't necessarily covered by a managed extension detection response solution. So I think you'll find that if you're headed in that direction, the two together are quite compelling. And that's the kind of the primary point. But I'll also share up front, there's nothing about what you will see today that is specific to Cato Networks. We can deploy that independently of them if you are not cloud native, or we can certainly work in tandem with them if you are or you're headed in that direction. So the prior presenters all did a good job of covering the security threat landscape, the fact that humans continue to be the weak link in the chain. I think we all are pretty well versed in that. Those of you who follow the reality TV show of artificial intelligence, and it's certainly one of the most exciting shows on the planet right now, you may have heard about Claude Mythos, which has gained a lot of notoriety. Was introduced by Anthropic back in the April timeframe. Mythos was special in that it made it so that agentic AI can essentially scrape any institution's environment and find all open vulnerabilities, steal credentials, move around laterally, get into a protected database, do a data exfil, cover tracks, and do that in a very automated and rapid fashion. So this was a pretty scary outcome. There's a lot that's been written about it. There's a lot we could go into, but we're a bit time constrained. But just take note that if you have language models out there like Anthropic's Mythos or OpenAI's GPT 5.5, these are very, very capable systems. They make it much, much easier now for attackers to chain together events and wreak havoc in your world. So we do have to be increasingly vigilant about this. Yes, humans are weak, and we will continue to click on things that we shouldn't, but just know that there is a wealth of software vulnerabilities out there waiting to be tapped. And so we have to think a little more broadly about how do we secure ourselves in any organization, credit unions included. So there's been other sort of kill chain coverage in prior slides. I won't go through this in detail. This is a very simplified version. But imagine for a moment these 8 steps, which would be a pretty common chain in this day and time, that you'll see across 4 steps in an attack chain. So it starts with getting entry into your IT environment, establishing a foothold, moving around, looking for assets or data of high value, and then either damaging that or encrypting it or exfilling it for some kind of a financial gain. There's a set of specific steps that are chronicled here. You can see 8 of them. I won't belabor them, but the key thing here is to know that these are all common tactics used by sophisticated attackers today. What's changed in the very recent past is attackers used to have to perform these steps independently and then find a way to move from what they discovered in step one, insert data into step two, and move forward. Those days are gone. Now attackers are able to glue these steps together using capabilities that are widely available in large language models and the new advent of vibe coding. We're talking about fairly unsophisticated actors who now have access to very, very sophisticated tooling. So the scope of danger here is increasing by the day. If you look at this from a credit union perspective, and by the way, one of the things that was not talked about by the common press when Mythos was announced, there were lab studies where these sort of simulations took place, but in those simulations, there were actually no security stack products working against the attackers. There were no security policies in place. There was no reaction to an alert or an incident that was surfaced. So it was a bit of a slanted story. Not to say that those things can't happen, but you can't assume that there's no defense out there. So if we look at a typical credit union security stack, you're likely going to have endpoint detection and response deployed. Certainly, you'll have firewalls either at physical virtual edge points or even within the cloud at major data access points or application access points. Pretty much any organization is going to be using Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace. There's going to be some form of identity control, authentication, authorization control through Active Directory or Entra or something similar. And most organizations now have a cloud presence, some kind of a workload or applications that's running at Azure or AWS or Google Cloud or elsewhere. The problem in this world is those products and those IT products, they operate independently. They each see their own slice of the universe. They're not able to connect across those slices. And this is exactly what the new AI attack tool chains are trying to exploit. They're trying to move across that stack and get in between gaps of these products. So it's not that the stack isn't doing its job, it's that it's not operating as a unified defense. And that is the making it easier for attackers to get in and move around and do their bidding. So just a very quick slide here. There is plenty of signal to find attacker activity. There always has. This is no different than physical crimes. If you can look at network traffic, you can see unusual traffic patterns. You can see lateral movement. If you can look at endpoint activity through EDR type solutions, you can find clear evidence of flawless attacks and credential misuse. If you can see into user behavior activity, you can find things like multiple failed login attempts. The same is true for SASE signals and O365 and so forth. And of course, there's a lot of data that we can pull from cloud telemetry. The problem is no one of these signals will tell you the full story of an attack chain in progress. So just a quick commercial. Every security vendor writes their own threat reports. We have ours. This will be made available post-call. But in 2025, we looked at over 1 trillion raw logs and events from our customers and distilled that down to a little less than 50,000 situation reports. So that's a massive compression of the amount of information that has to be looked at to find the real, signal in the noise. That's what we do as a detection response provider. About 2/3 of the sit reps that we wrote were all mid-kill chain. That means specifically things like credential access, privilege escalation, lateral movement, and C2 or command and control activity. That latter one being really, really heinous. About half of the high risk events were picked up by network traffic signals. We always like to point that out. As an XDR service provider, we look at everything. We look at endpoint, cloud, identity, application, and network data because that's the big five. But the network always is the tail of the tape. Nothing happens if it doesn't cross a network. So you got to be particularly good at looking at that. And we will find most attacker activity and complement that through these other sources. But this report is a pretty easy read. It's written in plain English, and it's informative. And I would just like to point out that it is 100% mid-market based. There's nothing here that is Fortune 100 or Fortune 1000 in nature. We look strictly at organizations that are anywhere from 100 to 5,000 employees. So it's a pretty good fit for probably the folks on this call and what's happening in your particular IT environment. Let me take you quickly through what MXDR does. There are three sort of candles. You have to bring in data, that's the telemetry pipeline. You've got to look at a lot of that activity and process that into something meaningful. And then you have to drive some outcomes. That's the three things that we do as an MXDR service provider. On the left side of this slide, you see commonly deployed brands in each of the five types of telemetry signal. You may have many of these deployed in your credit union environment. Hopefully, there's some familiar logos there. These products produce a ton of telemetry, and it's very, very disparate, very, very hard to glue together effectively. So our solution, which is cloud-based, pulls all of that telemetry in, runs it through our detection engine, which is an eight-stage detection pipeline that uses machine learning very, very heavily and tries to find everything from a rule-based point of view where you can instantly stop something that is known bad behavior all the way through to something that is strictly anomalous. You do not know if it is malicious. You don't even know if it's suspicious, but it's worth looking at because you haven't seen it before. So this eight-stage detection pipeline is really, really good at pulling in all this telemetry, mapping it to OCSF, which is a standard, event mapping technology, creating a unified view of that, enriching that data, making it so that AI can operate on it very, very rapidly and very accurately. There are also a large number of threat intel sources that tell us what is the weather report out there? What are attackers doing right now? Who are they targeting? Is it vertically specific? Is it application specific? Is it server operating specific? All of these things are important to be able to process in real time. The next step is to be able to respond to the system's findings. This is where the human in the loop is so valuable. We have a pretty sophisticated case management system. This is where we actually generate our situation reports for the customers. It's done through agentic AI and natural language processing. And then for those things that are found by machine learning that are not easily pushed through to a SOAR action, that's where we'll involve our threat hunters and go in and look at things in detail, try to find maybe a new attacker TTP, and then put that one to bed, write a rule, push it back into the ML engine, and make sure that's covered in the future. The third and most important piece of this solution for customers is what is the outcome? The engine's our problem, the data ingest is our problem, it's not your problem. But what we want to do is present this in a way to you that is useful from a business outcome perspective. The first thing is anytime we can do an active response on your behalf, we will. Whether that's a firewall rule change or an endpoint quarantine or some of the other techniques that are used to invoke actions against attackers in real time. The second is if you want us to pipeline information or intelligence into a downstream system, maybe a ticketing system where you have people in your organization who do things either as part of an incident response or remediation or post-event activity, we can do that. The situation reports are vital. We pride ourselves on the sit reps in that they're far more than just an alert notification. They will tell you this is the alert or alerts that we saw. This is what they mean, and this is what you should do about it. Or you can ask us to, again, take that active response on your behalf. Last but not least, the system is very rich in terms of a set of operational dashboards that give you insight into what we're doing on your behalf, and tell you the state of each of the sit reps or cases that we see in progress. So you know what you're getting for your money. You know what's being done on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis. But that's the solution that we provide. And that is the only way to counter what attackers are doing from that early kill chain activity. So let's talk about Cato Networks for a moment. I'm sure you're well familiar with the SASE space. It's a very important space, secure access service edge, particularly good fit for organizations who are now, and maybe many credit unions look exactly like this. You have a data center location, one or more branch locations, and you probably have remote workers. So that's a pretty straightforward profile. It is obviously possible that you have everything, running through Cato, where all traffic can be encrypted, many protections can be put in place. You've got a really tight coupling between your internal environment and the outside internet world where your applications and or your data may sit. So Cato is particularly good at this. They're very cost effective. Obviously, Matrix is a huge partner of theirs, and they can go into detail about Cato in specific. If you think about Cato and Gradient Cyber together, we fill some gaps that Cato Networks alone will not fill. So we're going to look a little more broadly at the telemetry available from your IT or security environment. We can put eyes on anything that Cato picks up within their sort of edge deployment inspection. We can also look directly into Azure or Google GCP or Office 365. So there's much that we can do, and we can look at EDR solutions if you have those deployed. It's going to give you a bigger picture of attacker activity than perhaps Cato can alone. So to put that into specifics, if something happens that Cato has visibility to, they can block a command and control domain. They can block an IP address. They can do that at the network layer. They can isolate a particular user's network access. But those two steps are going to be done independently and manually by them. You still have endpoints that can be compromised. User credentials are still valid in that scenario. There isn't forensic evidence collection, which is important for compliance reasons. We'll touch on that in a moment. And there's no notion of a cross-domain incident timeline. All of those shortcomings can be covered by a strong MXDR solution, and that's all sort of mentioned on the right side of this diagram. So the idea here is to find the best way possible for not only managing your traffic between data center and branch locations and end users and inspecting that and performing the regular security prevention controls that you can and should be doing, but looking more deeply because attackers are super clever. They will find any gap between your systems they can exploit that, and then you're on the front page of the newspaper for the wrong reasons. So back to our early example, which is that eight-stage process, which is a fairly common one that's used. Traditional MDR solutions will fall a bit short because they will tend to process those 8 events independently. That's too slow. It's too human intensive. It's too error prone. What Quorum AI, which is the brand of our MXDR solution, does is it finds all of those signals, glues them together, creates one incident, and contains that incident before it can turn into bang. Bang being data exfil or data damage or system shutdown or encryption, whatever the attacker is trying to achieve. You have to be able to do this with accuracy and speed, and that's ultimately what you're paying us to do on your behalf. So, just giving you a quick checklist that you should probably have, in the back of your mind if you're out looking for a solution like this. If you don't have MXDR and you're in the hunt for it, look for a solution that is feeding off of all 5 domains of critical information. Make sure that the solution is able to normalize that to an OCSF standard and enrich that before you run your detections. Otherwise, your detections will fall short. There is no panacea with detections. You must use a layered approach. That means static rules to behavioral rules to cross-domain correlations to machine learning-based anomaly detection. All of those are vital. It's critical to be focusing on findings and not alerts. If you focus on alerts, you will die in the process. The alert fatigue story is well trodden. It's no less of a problem today than it has been in the past, 10 or 15 years. But AI does make it easier for us to process that with speed and accuracy. You should be looking for decision-ready outputs, not just a system that tells you have alerts. You want multipath response. So if you can incorporate active containment wherever you would like for us to authorize that, that's in your best interest. And last but least, you want to be doing this continuously. It's a 24/7 game, and the system has to be able to learn from what it's seen and apply new rules on the fly. These are all part and parcel to our solution approach. Just a touch on compliance and regulatory bodies that are out there. Obviously, in the credit union space, National Credit Union Administration is a formidable player, as well as Federal Financial Institution Examination Council. These two agencies are fairly stringent in their requirements for what credit unions need to adhere to for compliance standards. I've just picked on four items here that come up in conversations we have with credit unions. And you have to adhere to, in the case of NCUA, a 72-hour cyber incident notification rule. Our sit reps solve that for you, full stop. You cannot have underdeveloped incident response plans. You do need to have proper testing and very, very clear, role and role separation of duties. So MXDR removes the ad hoc from this and turns this into a very, very clear, tested workflow, attestation-based, clear division of responsibility play. Examiners will not accept policies on paper any longer. Our SIP reps and our dashboards produce the kind of active real-time telemetry that you need to sort of stand up to the more modern standards. I will say that the 2025 FFIEC update has been superseded by NIST. One of the things to note is our system has a NIST framework scorecard built directly in. It will tell you how well you're adhering to NIST over time as you make control changes or personnel changes or policy changes. That makes it easier for you to prove to external agencies that you're doing the right things to guard yourself against calamity. So these are important points, and it's important to note that MXDR can help you quite a bit with these agencies and, of course, state examiners. On the right, you see just a version of one of our situation reports. It's too small to see, but just know that for every situation that we identify, we're writing an executive summary. There's a very clear, clean, plain English incident overview that can be understood by administrative executive personnel or people who are down at the operating level. Everything we do is mapped to MITRE ATT&CK framework, so you can see how you're doing relative to the TTPs that are out there and are being followed by the best agencies in the world. Key observations will be pointed out in plain English. We will identify every indicator of compromise. We'll tell you what the impact assessment is, and a response tab will tell you this is what you should do or what we're doing on your behalf. So we try to take all the black art out of this and make it very rote and deterministic. There is a document that we've written for those who may want to delve deeper into what does a Cato Networks gradient cyber integration look like. It's a pretty easy read. It gets into the right level of technical coverage, but it also explains this is what Cato does really, really well. This is what Gradient Cyber MXDR does well. This is the value of putting them together. We'll make that document available for you if you'd like to read that. Last but not least, I appreciate all who've stayed with us through this lengthy session. It's a lot to absorb. You've seen a lot of slides. You probably won't remember everything, but if you're interested, we do have a free proof of value. It typically is a 30-day engagement. We run these through Matrix Networks, so you can have access to this through your account executive with them. This is a no-charge way of us plugging MXDR into your environment. We almost always will find something that you don't know about. It may be hair-raising or it may be innocuous, but we can put eyes on your environment in a way that you may not be able to on your own. And the whole goal here is to find evidence of attacker activity early in the kill chain before they complete their mission. So if you'd like to give it a shot, looking at your data in your environment using our expertise, we're happy to do that.